In a quiet courtroom, a young boy takes a deep breath, his small frame trembling with the weight of unspeakable truths. His voice, barely above a whisper, cuts through the heavy silence. They lied. The judge stiffens, her face pale, as those two simple words unravel a web of deceit and cruelty. This is the story of Noah, a boy silenced by fear but driven by courage, who dared to expose the darkest corners of his foster home. What would you do if someone you trusted betrayed you in the most profound way? How far would you go to seek justice? Noah's life had been marked by tragedy. After losing his biological parents in a tragic accident, he was placed into the foster care system, a system meant to protect him but one that ultimately failed him. His new foster parents, Paul and Diana, appeared to be the perfect guardians. To the outside world, they were kind, generous, and nurturing, the embodiment of the ideal foster family. But behind closed doors, their smiles turned to sneers, and their kind words were replaced with harsh commands and biting insults. Paul controlled the household with an iron fist, his temper flaring at the slightest provocation. Diana, though quieter, was no less complicit, using guilt and manipulation to keep Noah in line. Their charm masked a sinister reality, and Noah was trapped, unable to escape their grasp. At school, Noah's struggles did not go unnoticed. Ms. Carter, his observant and compassionate teacher, saw past the mask he wore every day. She noticed his reluctance to engage, the dark circles under his eyes, and the way he flinched at sudden movements. Ms. Carter had worked with children in foster care before, and she knew the signs of hidden abuse. Determined to help, she began keeping a closer eye on Noah, piecing together the troubling details of his life. However, helping Noah would not be easy. Paul and Diana had perfected the art of deception, skillfully deflecting concerns and building a network of allies who believed in their facade. But Ms. Carter was determined, and Noah's growing friendship with a new classmate, Liam, would spark a glimmer of hope. As the story unfolds, Noah's quiet courage will not only expose the truth but also challenge the system that allowed his suffering to persist. Will his bravery lead to justice? Or will Paul and Diana's lies shield them from accountability? Stay with us as we dive into this harrowing yet inspiring tale of resilience, courage, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Noah's foster home was a place of polished perfection on the outside but suffocating cruelty behind closed doors. Paul and Diana prided themselves on their spotless home and well-manicured lives. They greeted neighbors with warm smiles, attended community events, and spoke about their loving family at church. But once the doors were shut, the mask slipped. Paul ruled the house with an iron fist, his temper as sharp as his words. The smallest mistake, spilling water on the counter or forgetting to tuck in a chair, would trigger his anger. "You're useless," he'd hiss, towering over Noah. "You should be grateful we took you in." Diana, while less confrontational, was equally damaging. She used guilt like a weapon, reminding Noah of how much they sacrificed for him. "Do you know how hard we work to keep a roof over your head?" she'd say. Noah quickly learned to navigate their moods, staying as quiet and invisible as possible. He avoided eye contact, spoke only when spoken to, and spent most of his time in his small, sparsely furnished room. He would sit on his bed, Staring at the worn photograph of his biological family tucked under his pillow, a faint reminder of a life he barely remembered. The fear of punishment kept Noah from asking for help. He internalized every insult, believing their words to be true. To the outside world, Paul and Diana seemed like saints. To Noah, they were captors, controlling every aspect of his life. School was supposed to be an escape. But even there, Noah struggled. His demeanor was subdued, and he rarely participated in class. Ms. Carter, his English teacher, began to notice the signs. His homework was often incomplete, and he avoided speaking during discussions. She observed his slouched posture, the dark circles under his eyes, and the way he flinched when someone raised their voice. Ms. Carter had seen this before: children from troubled homes who tried to blend into the background. Determined to help, she started keeping a journal of her observations. Each entry painted a troubling picture: Noah's reluctance to join group activities, his faded and ill-fitting clothes, and the occasional bruises he tried to hide. One day, during lunch, a new student named Liam approached Noah. Liam was outgoing and confident, a stark contrast to Noah's reserved nature. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked with a grin. Noah shrugged, unsure how to respond. Liam's persistent friendliness began to chip away at Noah's walls. He talked about his love for basketball, his dislike for cafeteria food, and his old school. While Noah remained mostly quiet, Liam didn't seem to mind. Over time, their tentative friendship grew. Liam's easygoing nature provided Noah with a small sense of normalcy, a reminder that not everyone in the world was like Paul and Diana. The cracks in Noah's fragile world widened one fateful evening when he overheard a conversation between Paul and Diana. As he sat in his dimly lit room, a faint murmur from the kitchen caught his attention. His heart thudded in his chest as he crept closer to the door, pressing his ear against it, straining to make out their words. "It's easy money," Paul said, his tone smug. "You just play the part. Keep the kid in line, and the checks keep rolling in. It's not rocket science." Diana's voice was quieter but equally damning. "We can't have another visit from the school. You need to make sure he keeps his mouth shut." Noah's blood ran cold. Their words confirmed what he had suspected but never dared to believe: they didn't care about him, they only cared about the money they received as foster parents. That night, Noah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Paul's words echoed in his mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. For years, he had endured their abuse in silence, believing he had no choice. But now, he couldn't ignore the truth. They weren't just cruel, they were using him for financial gain. The next day at school, Noah hesitated but finally approached Ms. Carter during lunch. His voice barely above a whisper. He said, "I need to talk to you." Ms. Carter's concern deepened as Noah haltingly described what he had overheard. Later, during recess, Noah confided in Liam as well. "They don't care about me," he admitted, his voice shaking. "They only care about the money." Liam's expression darkened. "That's messed up, Noah. You don't deserve this." Both Ms. Carter and Liam assured Noah that he wasn't alone. Ms. Carter promised to help, and Liam vowed to stand by his side. For the first time, Noah felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, He could find a way out of the nightmare he had been living. Noah's decision to take action marked a turning point in his life. After confiding in Ms. Carter and Liam, he realized that he needed more than words to expose Paul and Diana. He needed undeniable proof. Late one night, while Paul and Diana were asleep, Noah retrieved an old phone he had hidden under a loose floorboard in his room. The phone's screen was cracked, and the battery barely held a charge. But it had a functioning camera and audio recorder. It was all he needed. The first time he used it, Noah's hands shook as he hit the record button. He tucked the phone into his pocket, the microphone barely visible, and ventured into the living room where Paul was watching television. Within minutes, Paul's frustration erupted over something trivial, a misplaced remote. His voice boomed, laced with insults. "You can't do anything right. Can you? Useless. Just like I said." Noah's heart pounded as he captured every word. Later, he listened to the recording in the safety of his room. Hearing Paul's venomous tone play back was both terrifying and empowering. This was proof real. Undeniable proof. In the days that followed, Noah began documenting everything. He took photos of the faint bruises on his arms after Paul's angry outbursts. He recorded Diana's cold, guilt-ridden remarks. Each piece of evidence was carefully hidden away, ensuring Paul and Diana wouldn't find it. Meanwhile, Ms. Carter was doing her part. She approached other teachers, discreetly gathering their observations about Noah. Many had noticed his withdrawn demeanor, his reluctance to participate, and the occasional bruises he tried to hide. Together, they began to piece together a case that painted a damning picture of Paul and Diana. Liam, too, became an invaluable ally. One afternoon, when Paul and Diana were out, Liam helped Noah sneak into Paul's office, a place Noah was forbidden to enter. Inside, they found stacks of papers, receipts, and a folder labeled "Finances." Liam kept watch while Noah sifted through the documents, snapping photos of anything that seemed suspicious. Among the files were bank statements and invoices that told a shocking story. Paul and Diana had been using the foster care funds for luxury purchases, designer clothes, expensive dinners, and even a weekend getaway. Noah's hands shook as he photographed the evidence, knowing he had found what he needed to expose them. With a growing collection of evidence, Noah felt a sense of hope he hadn't experienced in years. But as he became more proactive, Paul's suspicions began to grow. One evening, Noah made the mistake of leaving his bedroom door slightly ajar. Paul, noticing the oversight, barged in without warning. "What are you hiding in here?" he demanded, his eyes scanning the room. Noah's pulse quickened as Paul's gaze landed on the loose floorboard. Thinking quickly, Noah stepped in front of it, feigning innocence. "Nothing. I was just reading." Paul's glare lingered before he stormed out, muttering threats under his breath. That night, Noah doubled down on his efforts to hide the phone and documents, knowing that if Paul found them, everything would be lost. The tension at home reached a boiling point a few days later. Paul's temper flared when Noah accidentally spilled a glass of water on the dinner table. "You're a worthless burden," Paul spat, grabbing Noah's arm so tightly it left red marks. Noah winced but remained silent, the phone in his pocket quietly recording every word. That night, Noah reviewed the recording, his hands trembling. The venom in Paul's voice was undeniable, and the mark on his arm provided visual proof to match the audio. Noah uploaded the files to a cloud account Ms. Carter had helped him set up, ensuring the evidence would be safe even if Paul discovered his phone. The next day at school, Noah shared the latest evidence with Ms. Carter and Liam. Ms. Carter's face hardened as she reviewed the recordings and photos. "This is more than enough to take to the authorities," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. However, Noah couldn't shake the fear that Paul and Diana would somehow find a way to talk their way out of it. He voiced his concerns to Liam after school. "What if they spin it? They always do." Liam placed a reassuring hand on Noah's shoulder. "Not this time. You've got proof now. They can't get away with this." Despite Liam's reassurance, Paul's growing suspicions made life at home even more dangerous. He began monitoring Noah more closely, randomly searching his room and questioning his every move. Diana's passive-aggressive remarks turned sharper, her tone dripping with disdain. But Noah refused to back down. With every bruise, every insult, and every lie he documented, his resolve grew stronger. He was no longer just a victim, he was building a case that would finally expose Paul and Diana for who they truly were. As the tension escalated, Noah knew one thing for certain: the truth was on his side. And he wouldn't stop until justice was served. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension as the judge entered and took her seat. Noah sat beside Ms. Carter, his hands gripping the edge of the chair. On the other side of the room sat Paul and Diana, their polished appearances and calm expressions betraying nothing of the truth. Paul wore a tailored suit, his usual commanding presence on full display, while Diana dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, playing the part of a heartbroken mother. The trial began with Paul and Diana's lawyer painting them as loving and dedicated foster parents who had gone above and beyond for Noah. "Raising a child who has experienced trauma is no easy task," the lawyer said, his voice filled with false empathy. "Paul and Diana Miller have done everything in their power to provide a stable home for Noah, despite his behavioral challenges." Paul nodded solemnly, while Diana sniffled, her expression one of exaggerated sorrow. They had practiced this facade for years, and it was clear they believed they could fool the court just as they had fooled everyone else. But Noah wasn't the same scared boy they had silenced for so long. When it was his turn to take the stand, he walked to the witness box with shaky legs but a determined heart. "Tell us about your experience living with Paul and Diana," the prosecutor prompted gently. Noah took a deep breath. They were nice in front of other people," he began, his voice trembling. "But at home, it was different. They yelled at me all the time. Paul said I was worthless. Diana made me feel like I was a burden." He paused, his hands clutching the edges of the stand. "They only care about the money," he added. "I heard Paul say it on the phone." Gasps rippled through the courtroom as Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out his old phone. "I recorded them," he said, holding it up. "I also took pictures of the bruises." The prosecutor played the recordings, Paul's venomous words echoing through the room. The photos of Noah's injuries were displayed on the screen, eliciting shocked murmurs from the audience. Ms. Carter was called next. She spoke with unwavering conviction, detailing her observations of Noah's withdrawn behavior, the bruises she had noticed, and the concerning conversations she had overheard. Noah has shown incredible bravery by coming forward, she said. Her voice steady. He deserves justice. Finally, Liam took the stand. I saw how scared Noah was, he said. Paul and Diana pretended to care about him. But behind closed doors, it was a nightmare. They don't deserve to have any kids in their care. After hours of testimony, the judge retired to her chambers to deliberate. The courtroom fell into a tense silence as everyone awaited the verdict. Noah sat beside Ms. Carter, his heart pounding in his chest. Paul and Diana, despite the damning evidence, maintained their composed exteriors. When the judge returned, her face was solemn. She began by summarizing the evidence, the recordings, the photos, the financial documents, and the testimonies from Noah, Ms. Carter, and Liam. The court finds overwhelming evidence of neglect and financial fraud on the part of Paul and Diana Miller, she announced. Her voice firm. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Paul's face turned red, his carefully constructed facade cracking, while Diana's eyes filled with tears not of remorse, but of panic. Effective immediately, the judge continued. Paul and Diana Miller are stripped of their status as foster parents. They are found guilty of child neglect and financial fraud. Paul Miller is hereby sentenced to prison for his actions. Diana Miller, while complicit, will face a separate hearing regarding her role in these offenses. The bailiffs approached Paul, who stood frozen in shock. As they placed him in handcuffs, he glared at Noah, his lips curling into a snarl. "This isn't over," he muttered. But his words carried no weight anymore. The judge turned her attention to Noah, her expression softening. "Noah, you've endured more than any child should ever have to face. Your courage in coming forward has ensured justice will be served. You are to be reassigned to a new foster home immediately." Ms. Carter cleared her throat, standing. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "If it pleases the court, I would like to offer Noah a permanent home with my family." The judge raised her eyebrows, surprised but touched by the offer. "Ms. Carter, are you prepared for this responsibility?" "Yes, Your Honor," she replied, looking at Noah with a warm smile. "He's already a part of our lives. We'd be honored to make it official." The judge nodded. "Very well. Noah, do you agree to this arrangement?" Tears filled Noah's eyes as he looked at Ms. Carter. For the first time in years, he felt safe. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'd like that." With that, the judge adjourned the court, marking the beginning of a new chapter in Noah's life, one filled with hope, love, and a family that truly cared. Noah's heart raced as he stepped out of the car and onto the driveway of Ms. Carter's home. The house was modest yet brimming with warmth, its soft yellow walls glowing in the late afternoon sun. The garden overflowed with colorful blooms that swayed gently in the breeze, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile environment Noah had left behind. For the first time, he felt like he was stepping into a home, not a house. For the first time in years, Noah allowed himself to hope that this might be a place where he could truly belong. Ms. Carter smiled warmly as she opened the front door. "Welcome home, Noah," she said softly, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Inside, the house was just as welcoming as its exterior. The living room was cozy, with bookshelves lining the walls and the faint smell of freshly baked cookies lingering in the air. As they stepped inside, Ms. Carter's teenage daughter, Grace, bounded into the room. Her bright smile and friendly demeanor immediately put Noah at ease. "Hi there. You must be Noah," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Grace. And I'm pretty much the reigning champion of board games around here. If you're up for a challenge, let me know." Noah managed a small smile, nodding shyly. Grace's lightheartedness was contagious. And for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of comfort in his chest. Over dinner, the family made an effort to include Noah in their conversation, asking him about his favorite foods, movies, and hobbies. Though he didn't say much, their genuine interest in him made a difference. Later that evening, as Ms. Carter tucked him into bed, she noticed him clutching a worn photo of his biological family. "You can keep that wherever you want, Noah," she said gently. "They're a part of who you are. And we're here to make sure you never forget that." Her words were simple but filled with understanding. And Noah felt his walls begin to crumble, if only slightly. In the days that followed, Noah began to settle into his new life. At first, he kept to himself, unsure of how to navigate the unfamiliar kindness around him. Ms. Carter was patient, giving him space but always reminding him that she was there whenever he needed her. One afternoon, as Noah sat on the porch with Ms. Carter, watching the sunset, she turned to him with a gentle smile. "You've been through so much, Noah," she said. "But I want you to know something: you're safe here. No one is ever going to hurt you again." Noah looked down, fiddling with the edge of his sleeve. What if I mess up?" he asked hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Carter's heart ached at his words. She reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Noah, this isn't about being perfect. It's about being a family. And families stick together, no matter what." Her words lingered in his mind as he slowly started to open up. He began joining Grace in her favorite board games, laughing for the first time in years as she exaggerated her victory dances. He helped Ms. Carter with small chores around the house, feeling a sense of pride when she thanked him warmly for his efforts. One evening, while they were sitting in the living room, Noah hesitated before asking, "Why did you want to take me in? You didn't have to." Ms. Carter looked at him with tears brimming in her eyes. "Because you deserve love, Noah. You've been so brave. And you've shown so much strength. I couldn't let you face the world alone." Noah nodded, his throat tight with emotion. For the first time in years, he felt like someone truly cared, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. With each passing day, Noah's walls came down a little more. The scars of his past didn't disappear overnight. But in the warmth of Ms. Carter's home, he began to believe in something he thought he had lost forever: hope. Conclusion and reflection: 500 words, Noah's message. 200 words. Noah reflects on his journey, encouraging others to speak out against injustice. Call to action: 300 words. Encourage viewers to support foster care reform and stand against child abuse. Ask viewers to share their thoughts in the comments. Subscribe and like the video. As Noah sat on the porch, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the horizon, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. From the cold, oppressive environment of Paul and Diana's house to the loving, welcoming home of Ms. Carter. His life had changed in ways he never thought possible. Looking back, Noah realized that his courage to speak up was the turning point. For so long, I felt invisible, Noah said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. I was scared. And every time I wanted to speak up, I told myself no one would care. But I was wrong. There are people who see you, people like Ms. Carter and Liam, who remind you that you're not alone. That your story matters. And that you deserve to be heard. Noah's message to others is simple yet powerful. If you're going through something hard, don't be afraid to speak up. It's scary. And it might feel impossible. But the truth matters. And there are people out there who will stand by you and fight for you. Just like they did for me. You're not alone. And you're worth so much more than the pain you've endured. Noah's story is a testament to the power of courage, resilience, and compassion. It also shines a light on the importance of reforming the foster care system and addressing the flaws that allow abuse to persist in silence. The foster care system is meant to protect vulnerable children. Yet cases like Noah's reveal how easily it can be manipulated. That's why it's crucial to advocate for stricter oversight, better support for foster families, and resources that empower children to report abuse without fear. We encourage you to stand with us in the fight against child abuse and for a more accountable foster care system. If you suspect a child is being mistreated, don't hesitate to report it. Your voice could make all the difference in saving a life. If Noah's story moved you, let it be a call to action. Stand with us in protecting vulnerable children and ensuring no one suffers in silence. Support organizations that fight for foster care reform. Provide shelter for abused children. And give them hope for a brighter future. Together, we can turn stories like Noah's into a beacon of change. A small donation or even spreading awareness can create ripples of change. Finally, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you witnessed or experienced something similar? How do you think we can improve the foster care system? Let us know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and share this video to spread awareness. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories like Noah's stories of courage, hope, and the fight for justice. Together, we can make a difference.